You have sympathy with protesters who blocked a bus from carrying migrants to the Bibby Stockholm barge. 0207 862 2222 is the number. Do give us a ring. Activists surrounded a coach after it parked up at a hotel in London yesterday morning, with reports it was being used to transfer asylum seekers from a hotel to take them to the Bibby Stockholm barge in Dorset. The Home Office says protesters became intimidatory and aggressive, and over 40 of them were arrested by police at the site of the protest. Home Secretary James Cleverly has criticised the activists, saying housing migrants in hotels cost the British taxpayer millions of pounds every day. So is it wrong for people to get involved and stop the buses from pulling away? Or do you have sympathy for the protesters? Are you part of a community where asylum seekers are residents? We want to hear from you. Esther, what do you make of this at the point where people are being taken, possibly from your own community, and taken to the barge in Stockholm for a future that's uncertain? Do we have a right and a duty to get involved and do something about it?
We have a right to protest, and I absolutely believe in the right to protest. You don't have a right to get physical and to get violent and aggressive and intimidatory, as the police said. Look, I don't agree with the protesters, mainly because they're completely detached from reality. The main slogans they were shouting was "No borders, no nations, stop deportations." So clearly they don't believe in any form of border control, not at Heathrow Airport, not taking migrants to the Bibby Stockholm, whatever. But just because I disagree with them doesn't mean that they don't have the right to protest. Now, that is different from criminal behaviour, which is clearly why they got arrested. If they were just protesting, the police don't have the right to arrest them. I also think it's worth pointing out that the concerns of local residents to have unvetted, mainly male aliens in their communities is very valid. If you and I committed a crime, they know where we've been to school, they know where we live, they know who our friends are, they know our background. You have people coming across, and this is not kind of anti-immigrant or whatever, but you have people coming across that we don't know who they are. We don't know their background. They're coming from mainly conflict-ridden zones. We don't know if they were on the right side of that conflict. They're mainly men. If we're talking about refugees, I'd like to see more women and children, frankly, and apologetically. And I think you can't say that the concerns of residents are invalid when you literally have strangers in your community and you don't know who they are. But that being said, I don't disagree with their right to protest. Of course, they have the right to protest. I just don't agree with criminal behaviour, which is a common sense line.
Matt, is this a valid way to express your concerns about what's happening to your community? As Esther says, you can't expect to just drop people in dozens in a community and it not to have an effect and not to disrupt in some way the way of life that people have.
Asylum seekers and indeed economic migrants, and I think both types of people come to this country, have not crossed continents and risked their lives trying to cross the channel in order to commit crimes in Britain. I mean, that would be the most narcissistic and bizarre view of our own world, to suggest that people are coming here to commit crimes, to disrupt local communities. Of course, where you find human beings, you will find some criminals. We know that. And when an asylum seeker or an economic migrant commits a crime, the right-wing media will jump all over that. And that sends out a radicalising signal to people up and down Britain. Danger, danger. Actually, these are hugely vulnerable, many of them extremely brave human beings. Do I have sympathy for the protesters? I happen not to agree with their idea that there shouldn't be borders. I think borders are important. But I do have sympathy for them wanting to protect these people from a fate that might involve going to Rwanda, not in the case of yesterday, but might involve, in the short term, going to the Bibby Stockholm barge. Conditions there are so bad that someone who was working on the barge says that she was given fewer shifts because she was being friendly to some of those who were living there. We know that it is incredibly bad for people's mental health. It's described as having airport security on that barge. Anyone watching today, I ask you to consider whether you would want to go to the Bibby Stockholm. Just one final thought. Do I have sympathy for the authorities in clamping down on people who break the law? Of course I do, because otherwise, as you say, Esther, we would end up living in an anarchical society. But if you feel really strongly about something, you want to protest in a way that breaks the law, you have to accept the consequences.
We're talking about criminal damage here. There were cases of assault here. Those, we all agree, were unacceptable. However, what do you do in these situations if you feel that people are going towards the kind of environment, the kind of outcome that you're talking about, Matt? Is there a point where you have to do something? And, you know, we can look back at historical examples. For instance, the suffragettes, would they have achieved what they were trying to achieve without criminal damage? That was their policy. Is there a point where it does become justified and that's the only way you can achieve what you want?
I mean, I was in Soweto, in the township outside, or as part of Johannesburg, 2 days ago. I flew home yesterday. Maybe we'll talk about that later. And I was at the memorial site of the Soweto uprising in the mid-1970s when the apartheid regime massacred dozens, possibly hundreds of students for protesting peacefully. Those protests, without violence on behalf of the students, reverberated around the world. Now, of course, I'm not suggesting that in order to protest successfully, you need to be shot. Of course not. But peaceful protest can, done in the right way, have an enormous impact. I can't sit here on national television and advocate that people break the law. What I can do is to say to you that the suffragettes, people protesting yesterday, people protesting against the climate crisis, are very brave people. And the reason they're very brave people is because they know that they may break the law, and if they break the law, then the full force of the law will have to come down upon them. Would I do that myself? No, but I'm lucky enough to have a voice coming on shows like this.
OK, we're going to take some calls. Angie's in Essex. Angie, just wondering, are you from a community that's affected by the presence of asylum seekers, and do you support these protesters in what they're trying to achieve and the way they're trying to achieve it?
Yes, I am affected where I live by the immigrants and everything. And I think the protests are wrong, especially getting violent and attacking the police and everything. I do feel sorry for the genuine migrants from Afghanistan and countries like that. But the others, no, it's not fair. There's many young and middle-aged people on the streets in this country have tried desperately to get a place. They can't get it. The government's now saying all the tents on the streets, there's many tents around here, are going to get moved on and everything. So, I really don't think it's fair at all. I really don't think it's fair. All that millions and millions of pounds spent putting them up in top hotels, OK. But moving in, there's a lot of young people I've spoken to, homeless, you know, really, really ill over it, that would give their right arm to go in on that barge. Right arm. It just seems nothing's any good. And when they're paying these smugglers £4,000 to leave their country, I want to know where they get the money from. There's a lot of youngsters over here, young people, and those people haven't even got £4,000, haven't even got £100. It's just not fair, I don't think.
Angie, I promise you that if you talk to homeless people, as I've done in London, they will not want to go on that barge. The argument you make that there are a lot of people who were born in this country who are in great need is absolutely spot on. Of course, you're right about that. The answer to that is to find decent homes for those who do want to get off the streets. We know some have really difficult problems with drug abuse and so forth. They need to get the assistance that will help them off the streets and to give them civilised accommodation. The answer to the homelessness issue in this country, which is a really big one and a really important one, is not to send them to uncivilised conditions on a big barge where their mental health will, if anything, get worse.
But my daughter is 27. She suffers from severe mental health issues, very severe. And she was homeless. She came from a refuge. And I went to my local council because it said if you've got relatives in the, connections and all that. She's got a mother, me, and a sister living in the Canton borough. And when I took her to my council, she had a genuine case. They wouldn't help her. They sent her back to East London into danger, and then they decided that they will put her in hostel where she was discriminated against, and people was all racist to her in there and everything. She basically had a dog's life in there, and she was in there over a year. suffering and everything. And I've originally come from London. My sister still lives there. And I spoke to many, many people that said to me that they would give their right arm to go on that barge or something similar. You know what I mean? As I said, I just do feel sorry for the genuine migrants. And I'm not a racist because I have 2 mixed-race children. And I'm not a racist.
And
nothing's ever going to get done.
No one's going to call you a racist, Angie,
houses.
but do you think sometimes we conflate the hard times that are people going through in this country? That becomes a focus, and we then divert our blame and look at what's being offered to migrants rather than focusing
can I just say,
on, for instance, the cost of living crisis that we've just been through and the failure of the sort of support that your daughter needed.
Just before,
let Angie answer
hold
that.
on, because I want to say something in support of what Angie is saying. Just because I don't think it's not about conflating the two. We have systemic problems in this country that until we're forced, we never look at. Somehow during COVID, you had thousands of homeless people in this country that somehow the government was magically gave them accommodation to stop the spread of this virus, right? When push comes to shove, that's when the government wants to do something. But in the case of people that have been homeless in this country for years, that's not a priority. This Bibby Stockholm barge, if the government said, actually, it's not ideal, but this is for short-term housing just to get people off the streets, no one would have said a word. But somehow when you're putting migrants who've put themselves in danger to cross the channel, to pay people smugglers, to come onto our shores, and to effectively fight with the limited resources we have that should go to British citizens, somehow that makes us
There was an outbreak of Legionnaire's disease. There was an outbreak of Legionnaire's disease on that barge.
Have you ever been
People's
homeless?
mental health. No, I have not, and I don't need to have been health.
That's why you can sit here and say that a roof over their head is inadequate.
What I'm saying, you're misunderstanding. What I'm saying is not that we shouldn't get people off the street. As you say, that was done in the pandemic. What I'm saying is we should get people off the street but put them into civilised, proper accommodation, not a barge where we know people's mental health is deteriorating.
Okay, I just want to hear from Angie before we move on. Angie, do you think that there is a risk of looking at the problems we have in the country and then making migrants a focus of that and diverting our blame towards them?
I agree with what the gentleman on the panel's just said there, but at the same time, when is this government, when is this country going to put their own people first? Everybody I come across has conversations, and they're all saying the same thing. There's people in London, not being funny, there's people in London, there's black people and brown people. They're beautiful, they're lovely, they was born here. And they're all just saying the same thing. And if it comes to them wanting to come here and have a better life, what about their families in Afghanistan and places like that they're going to leave behind? The mothers and the children.
Yeah, which we've seen very few of.
What happens
Here's the thing.
to them?
You're talking about mental health and how being on the Bibby Stockholm affects their mental health. You know what's worse for your mental health? Being homeless and not having any sort of roof over your head, not having any sort of safety net. It's not ideal. I'm not saying it's the Ritz. But having a roof over your head is a 10 times better situation than living on the streets and then seeing the British taxpayer basically subsidizing foreigners coming to this, putting their own lives at risk, coming to this country illegally, than us taking care of our own. That's the only argument I'm saying. There's so many people I feel sorry for. Guess what? Brits should be at the front of the queue. OK, let's hear from Leslie Ann. She's in East Sussex. Leslie Ann, do you have any sympathy with the protesters in front of those buses in Peckham?
No, not really. We have wandered off the subject rather, haven't we? The protesters, I feel, would have been better off at work or school or college where presumably they could have been during the day, since they appear to be free to demonstrate in any way for any reason. And I do believe that they're not representative of the majority of the British taxpayers.
But
we are all paying tax.
We could all stay at work or do something else and turn a blind eye to what we feel are injustices and things that need protesting.
You're very good at talking over women, but have you got any practical solutions, sir?
Leslie Ann, if you felt I spoke over you, I'm very sorry.
Have you?
No, Leslie Ann, if you felt I spoke...
You've got no practical solutions at all. You just like talking over your fellow colleague on the panel, who has a right to speak and who you've hardly allowed to say one single word.
I'm not sure that's entirely justified, Leslie Ann, but please carry on.
I'm coming from a viewpoint. I'm a viewer, remember. You are paid to go on the programme. I am a viewer and I pay for my licence.
OK, did you feel that either Matt or Esther have not had the chance to speak? Do you guys feel I've shut you down? We're going to move on. Alan's in Berkshire. Alan, do you feel any sympathy at all with the protesters in front of the bus in Peckham there?
No, none at all. None at all. No. And, you know, I mean, good reason why. I believe people should have right to protest, but they're causing obstructions again. And like the other lady said, this Stockholm barge, I mean, I have to say, it is somewhere to live. And that lady that was talking earlier, it's a roof over the head. It's a floating hotel that is still. And can I just say that our troops, when we were fighting in the Falklands, I wasn't fighting, I went there after the war. And we stayed on these coastels, which are the same sort of things. And, you know, they did us, the troops, but this one is luxury. It's got, you know, kitchens, gyms, TVs. It's better than what the French give them, isn't it? They live in a tent in France, and that's why they all want to leave France and come on and risk that awful journey across the Channel. And I feel, why are they making that risky journey across the Channel with children, some of them? Not all, but some. I would never do that with my children. You know, I'm a pensioner now, and I feel so... I feel quite strong about it, and I think it's got to stop. And I think this is the answer. Put them on this barge, as you call it. I think it's perfect, and they're very lucky to have this.
I mean, Matt, this is a structure, isn't it? This is actually providing some structure. It's visible. We know where these people are going. We can observe and scrutinise their outcome. If they are spread out through the country in hotels which weren't designed to provide homes for people on a temporary or permanent basis in that way, then we don't know where they are, and we can't observe them from the outside and say, look, we actually can follow these people and understand what our government is doing for them.
I'm not saying that there should be no detention centres. I'm not saying that we shouldn't keep tabs on who is in our country. Of course we should. I also have an enormous amount of respect for people who've served in the British Armed Forces, who've done things that I haven't been brave enough to do, or I haven't volunteered to do. This shouldn't be about a race to the bottom. We compared, Alan there was in Berkshire, comparing our treatment of asylum seekers and economic migrants to how the French treat them. We have our own standards that should be upheld, and they should apply to our own homeless, and they should apply to people who are desperate enough to come to our country.
So you'd be OK with homeless people being put on the barge?
Not on the barge, no. I'm not OK on anyone being put on the barge because
would you house them in your house?
No, I wouldn't house them
in
my house because I have a family and we don't have space for them, and I've got my first responsibility is to my family. That doesn't mean that doesn't mean that I wouldn't pay my taxes to contribute in my small way to making sure that the conditions for people in our country, whether they are our own homeless or they are people who are coming from abroad, to be put up in humane conditions. That makes us a civilised society.
I just don't understand why you wouldn't want to live with them if they're not criminals and they're just coming over because they're desperate.
If I was a single man...
so you would if you were single?
If I was a single man...
Oh, OK.
Yeah, well, I don't know why you're being patronising.
No, I'm curious what the conditions are for you to have strangers in your house.
I have not been single since the Ukraine crisis happened, or indeed since we started taking people in from countries such as Afghanistan when the crisis unfolded 3 years ago. Under those circumstances, I absolutely would have taken someone in. I just want to make one final point. You were asking earlier, Esther, why there are so many men coming. Well, the answer is obvious, because it's incredibly dangerous to cross continents and to cross the Channel with a child. And men are better able to do with it. So presumably what they do is they come here, and then the hope is to bring their families later on.
OK,
I want to take one more call. Lucy is in Buckinghamshire. Lucy, do you have any sympathy for the protesters that we saw yesterday in London?
Yes, generally sympathise with the migrants in general, because they tend to be used as the talking points all the time. And these are people that are desperate. And I understand the protesters, they do have a right to protest within the law. So far, I don't think they've broken the law. And I take issue in particular with Esther earlier. She referred to the migrants as aliens, as like undocumented aliens or something like that. And I think that's really incendiary to call people that are desperate aliens. They are people
They are
like you and
aliens.
I.
Most of them destroy their documentation. We actually don't know who they are. I'm not saying aliens as in they're like deformed or anything. Aliens as in people that they're unvetted.
Listen.
If you come to this country, you go through an immigration process. We know your name, we know your family, we know where you come from, you know where you went to school, we know your blood type, we know things about you. If you come into this country and we don't have standard information about you, that makes you an alien. It's not a derogatory term. It's just a fact.
To me, it is, and especially to you coming from as an.
What is the definition of alien? Can you define alien? Can you define
No. You know, like, why can't you just call them undocumented? They are people like you and I. They are not aliens.
That's the point. They're human beings, and they matter every bit as everyone on this panel and everyone watching.
This is a pointless semantics game. If I went to Colombia with no papers and they didn't know who I was, I would be called an alien. It wouldn't offend me because I don't have any sort of ID. That's not an insult. I don't know why you're playing semantics. If one of these undocumented migrants broke into your home, would you feel sorry for them?
Can I speak, please? I am not against a documentation. You know, I'm a migrant as well. I'm a documented migrant. Actually, I came here. I was recruited. I came here. I work here. I contribute to this. But people like you and I should not be using language like that, because that language, when it's used against us,
you shouldn't be using the English language.
No. I'm not referring to people as aliens. You know, that's not good.
That's the truth.
I don't want to get caught on this point. Lucy, I just want to come back to the protesters, if we can, because you did mention that they didn't break the law. And, of course, they have been arrested
for breaking the law,
assault and for criminal damage. Does that cross the line for you? Do you lose sympathy with them when they commit acts that are seen to be criminal that they can be prosecuted for?
Yes, clearly, if they broke the law, yes, they broke the law. I'm a law-abiding citizen. You know, I really sympathise with people who abide by the law. But if they cross it, then obviously, you know, the law has to take its course. I'm happy for that to happen. But, I just really think we should mind our language, really, when we discuss people. Don't demonize them, dehumanize them, and make them look like they're less than human beings.
And also,
coming from somebody.
And also to criminalise them, like Esther just did. I don't want to let that pass. You said, would you be frightened if someone broke into your house? You'd come over. Of course, but we'd be frightened if someone broke into our house, whether they came from abroad or from our own country.
Yes,
Stop stigmatising and demonising.
We have a system that can keep track of people. That's the point. It's a lot harder to keep track of people that have no identification. You don't know where they're from. You don't know anything about them. Then they're not. Why are you pretending to be ignorant of this?
The police hardly solve any burglaries at all. The police in half of the areas of England haven't solved a single burglary in 3 years. I don't care who I'm burgled with. I tell you what, Esther, I don't care who I'm burgled by. I don't want to be burgled, and I want the police to catch whoever it is.
How do they catch them if they don't know who they are?
They're not catching them anyway, but they use the same system. They use the same system, CCTV evidence. It's not moronic.
So you have CCTV or someone you don't know?
Okay.
Sorry, so you're more likely to catch a criminal if they've got an ID card or a passport.
If you have their name.
If you call me moronic, that's an absurd thing.
We're going to have to draw this one to a
Absolutely absurd.
close there. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Lucy.